Hi guys, great to see you all. And for those that I can't see you online, but good to have you all here. I'm Laura. Nice to meet you. We're going to be talking today about the science versus art of pricing and revenue. I use this extended metaphor of science and art. It works better on some slides than others, but what I mean by this is the science is always going to be the definition of what we're looking at. Sometimes the quantification, finding the number that is relevant to your business. And then the art is the interesting and customizable ways that you get to play with that number as a part of your go-to-market strategy. So that's what I mean when I say science and art throughout this presentation. But I don't want to just be talking to you. I would love to be talking with you. So maybe, and folks who are on Zoom, I'll repeat some things over the mic here, but maybe if I could just get a sense of who's in the room. How many folks are actively involved in a startup today? Probably everybody. Yes? Okay. How many of those startups have a slide somewhere that says how much money you intend to make by a certain date? Yep, you've got one? Okay, yep, excellent. How many startups are already making money that have revenue? Excellent. Okay. You're making money, but no slide that says no goals for making that money.
Just keep the product running, but
Okay.
goal because
No goals yet.
yeah.
Okay. So maybe goals as a result of going through this presentation then. How many folks in the room are B2B? So you're selling to businesses. Yes. And B2C, selling to individual consumers? Yes. What are you?
I'm SaaS.
SaaS. Okay, so selling to businesses?
But also into customers.
Customers. Okay, so B2C. Excellent. So some of these are going to be more relevant to B2B or more relevant to B2C. But what I've found from working across a whole bunch of different industries and company types is that these levers that we'll talk about today, they really do hold across a broad range of different companies. So there might be some that are unique to your scenario, but I'm sure we'll find those during the Q&A portion at the end here. So Allison did a great job of giving me an introduction. I work in revenue operations, which for folks who are unfamiliar with RevOps, it's basically like the tinkering behind the scenes for marketing, sales, customer success, business development, and finance. So we get to see a lot of how things work. We're very often involved in exercises like annual planning and pricing. So if you're interested in RevOps or want to talk more about that, you can feel free to email me there. And I also am an entrepreneur in residence at CMU. So you can find me on the domain experts part of the website if you ever want to talk to me about go-to-market planning or anything like that. So today we're going to be talking about the levers first. So as part of my extended science and art metaphor, we've got 7 levers that I think are available for companies to play with when it comes to customizing your go-to-market strategy. That we're going to define those levers first, talk about the science, and then we're going to talk about the art of lever pulling. So a few different scenarios where you can see how turning up or down the dials on these things has an impact on your go-to-market. Then we're going to zoom in on one of those levers, value, and we're going to talk about the science of pricing and the art of pricing. Pricing is one of the most difficult things that a startup can do, especially at the beginning when your product, hopefully, is the worst it will ever be because you're still working on it. It's maybe right at the start of its development, but you still want to price it according to the value that you think that it will have. So we'll talk through some of the options there. And I'll say as we get started too, if you are pre-revenue and listening to this presentation, zoom yourself forward a little bit in the development, because we're talking about a point of development for a startup where you both have a product, you're making revenue, and you're setting targets for what revenue you want to make into the future. And really, no matter where your entrepreneurial journey takes you, if you're doing really well, if you're not doing so well, you're going to come across one of these unreachable goals. Sometimes if you're doing really well, most of the goals feel unreachable. That's maybe the board coming to you and saying, I think that you can triple revenue this year. and you're like, there's no way that I can triple revenue this year. Or maybe you want to increase the value of your company as you go into a raise so that you can raise on the most favorable valuation. You might be setting these goals for yourself, but you will come across an unreachable goal. And what the idea that I'm going to offer you today is that there are at least these 7 levers that you can pull in concert with each other to help you reach this goal. So as I said, every company is different with these levers, but what I've found is that most of these concepts hold across all different types of companies and industries. There's 2 types of levers that I want to talk about today. The first are the revenue levers. So pulling up and down on these are going to increase or decrease the amount of money that your company is bringing in. So this is the top line levers. It might be obvious that you always want to increase this lever, but there will be times in the over the course of your company that you will intentionally want to decrease this so that you can pull up on some other things, potentially on the cost side. So the cost side levers are pulling up and down is going to affect your bottom line. So think about this when we have a company who's making incredible revenue. We've got like an Amazon or a YouTube, for example, but they're making no money at the bottom. They might want to focus on these cost levers to the expense of their revenue levers so that they can increase the profit that they're making at the bottom at the expense of that revenue. And when we talk about these today, we're going to be focusing on these 5: volume, value, time, rate, retention on the revenue side, and on the cost side, capacity and efficiency. And we'll talk about the science first. Science in this case, again, just defining what this means. And then we'll talk about how we want to pull these in concert with each other. So to give us maybe a little bit more relevance to the folks in the room, can you, maybe you, because I've been picking on you a little bit already, can you give me your elevator pitch, just 1 sentence?
Elevator pitch.
Yeah.
So for my company, we are a web design agency and we are devoted to provide innovative solutions.
Excellent. Okay, web design agency. Great. How about somebody else want to give their 1 sentence elevator pitch? Go ahead.
We are a health tech startup that diabetic food health, specifically providing real-time feedback to medical practitioners.
Excellent. And you said diabetic health? Okay, excellent. Okay, great. And maybe one more. You want to go?
I have an acting project-based club for teens
Okay,
where they create stories from scratch, and then we give them the tools to act, and then they create the story, and then they do the play for their friends.
excellent. I love that. Okay, so we have media,
Like design website.
Design-
products. Yeah.
design and website where your customers are businesses.
Yeah.
Your customers in the back,
It's doctors and patients. So
doctors and patients. Okay, kind of 2 sides, doctors and patients, and then students, presumably, or their
Students and
parents. Okay. Excellent. So thanks for the patience for the folks on the Zoom. I'm going to be trying to weave in some of those examples as we go through this to make it more relevant. If you have a question about how to make these levers relevant for your own use case, please raise your hand and I'd love to make that work for you. So the first lever here, when we talk about volume, it's probably the most clear one, is how many customers are entering at the top of your marketing funnel. So how many students and parents are you able to reach with your marketing at the very, very top of the funnel that you're trying to convert into customers? So if your company is pre-revenue, what you're thinking about here is your total addressable market, your ideal customer profile. If you're post-revenue and you're spending some dollars on that marketing, maybe you are looking at how many people are clicking your ads, how many website visitors do you have? Just what does that very, very top of the funnel look like? And we can do things to increase the very top of the funnel, and we can do things to decrease. Mainly when we're talking about something that is ad generated, it's how much money you're spending on your ads. Are we just increasing or decreasing that? If it's more of a sales led business, it could be how much are we focused on broad outreach. Maybe that's like your one-to-many emails. You're doing a huge email blast to 1,000 people at once. Or are we choosing more of a white glove strategy where we want to, send each individual customer a personalized email, maybe a personalized video that describes what our product is. So that's how you would sort of increase and decrease the lever of volume there. The next revenue lever here is value. So how much is each customer worth to you? So this is usually expressed as an average. So if we've got 4 customers over there, on average, they're paying us $5K, even though each one is paying us a different price. When you're first starting out with this and you're thinking about the value in your planning, you're not going to have very many customers to draw from. Maybe you don't have set pricing to draw from. I would use your best estimate when you're doing your planning. And I suggest maybe the first purchase that a customer makes is the average that you're thinking of. Some of your companies are going to have repeat purchases for customers over time. We would call that lifetime value or LTV. That is almost impossible for you to figure out at this point in your startup's journey. So I would really, for where you guys are, I would focus on the first purchase that the customer is going to make when considering your value. So for you with the website agency, how much is each customer worth to you, to put you on the spot?
So it's like the average,
The average first purchase that a customer would make with your company.
oh, they will make with my company.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. I only
We don't know
that
yet.
how much they pay me.
Okay.
I don't know how much they will earn from my services.
How much would they pay you for your services?
Like for average, each company is like 6,000.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. So when you're thinking about your revenue lever, then if you want to charge the customer more, maybe that's just by increasing the prices, or maybe that's by increasing the products that you're giving that customer so that each customer is worth more to you.
But
That's how you
can I
would.
just because can I just like directly increase the money that I charge them, or
You can do whatever you want with that. The question is, can we just directly increase the amount of money that we charge our customers? Absolutely, you can. It's not always a great decision, right? Because, and we'll talk about this with the art of pulling the levers, with the 2 that we're talking about already. If you increase your value, you might decrease that volume of the customers that you're bringing in because not as many customers want to buy at a high value. So when you're doing your planning, you really want to make sure that you're choosing the level of each one of these levers to the right point for your go-to-market strategy. And it sounds like the 6,000 is a good place for you to be starting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the next one we have is time. So important not to forget about time. It's less relevant to our B2C startups, more relevant to our B2B sales-led startups, but still really important. How long will it take for you to convert each prospect to a customer? If we greatly increase the value lever, so let's say we go from having a product that is $100 to a product that is $1,000, that decision of parting with $100 or parting with $1,000 will increase the time that it takes your prospect to make that decision, because parting with the money will take more evaluation on their part of your product. So playing around with some other levers can affect time here, and it's important to understand this so that you can make sure that you have enough customers in the funnel by the time you want to sell them. So if it takes you 3 months from a prospect entering the top of your marketing funnel to coming out the bottom, you don't want to set a sales target that expects that they will all be customers today. So really important to keep this in mind. You will hear this referred to as an average sales cycle or a deal duration. And this is really only important because revenue goals are time bound. So you don't want to say by the end of the year, we'll be here if you'll only be on your way to being there by the end of the year. Does that one make sense to everybody? Any questions on time? Okay, the next one is rate. So we talked about volume, the number of customers that are coming in the top of the marketing funnel, but this one is focusing on what is the rate that we are converting those prospects into customers. So what is the, how wedge-like is that funnel? This is usually expressed as a rate. So we'll say we are converting 30% of those in our marketing funnel into customers. That would be great. Usually, especially for B2C companies, that could be more like 1% because your volume is very high and your customers are quite low. If you are a B2B company with a very small total addressable market, that could be close to 100% because maybe you have 3 big customers that you want to go out to and you want to sell all 3 of those customers. So usually businesses fall somewhere in the middle of those 2 examples, but that is the rate. Does this make sense to everybody? Any questions on how this would apply to your specific startups? Okay. Retention. So not every company is going to have repeat purchases that are relevant to your business plan, but many of yours will, especially if you are doing software as a service or something like that. So of the customers that you've purchased already, how many will you retain into the next billing cycle? The advanced version of this is not only how many will you retain, but what will the growth of those customers in your current customer bucket look like the next time they come around for their billing cycle. And you can look at retention and churn here by customers, the number of customers, or by dollars. Usually when you're doing your annual plan, dollars is going to be the most relevant to you. But when you're first getting started, especially when you only have a handful of customers that you're working with, the number of customers is also relevant for investors because they want to know not only are you increasing the revenue that you're bringing in, it's also the case that every customer that works with you is getting value from the product and wants to continue working with you. Sometimes you might want to decrease retention for certain parts of your industry. So when you're getting started as an entrepreneur, you might think that your customer segment is here. And you might find that your customer segment is actually a bit upmarket or a bit down market from where you initially thought. Your product strategy might change where you are now only going to be releasing new products that serve a higher paying customer, for example. So you might want to intentionally churn parts of your market. And that's something really important to keep in mind when you are doing your go-to-market planning as well, because you'll want to take a look at the customers that you now don't care about. We always care about our customers, but maybe you don't want to work too hard to prevent that churn because your company's changing focus. And you'll want to take that into account with your go-to-market planning. I'll say to you that example will happen to almost everybody. It's just one of the things that happens, not even just at the beginning of your startup journey, but for most of the startups that I've been a part of, it's happened 3-4 years in. Once we understand, what our customer segment really looks like in our product strategy, this happens all the time. Okay, the next one, potentially the last one. I've lost count at this point. I think this is the last one here is capacity. So how much time does your organization have? Capacity is one of these things that we tend to lose sight of until people at your company are burning out. So you as founders will have probably teams of staff working with you, and you are also working full-time on this company. Until you reach your breaking point, it won't occur to most folks at the beginning that you need to increase this capacity proactively to meet the growth that you're intending for the next part of your go-to-market strategy. Time is your most expensive resource by dollars because salary by far is going to be the thing that you pay the most for. I'll say for most companies, some companies spend a lot of money on other things or R&D, but usually salary is the most expensive thing. Every hour your team spends doing something, they can't spend that doing something else. So it's the capacity that you have by the number of people that work at your company, but also what are they focused on? If you have a marketing team that's fully focused on increasing the volume lever and not focused at all on increasing the value lever, that's going to have a big impact in your go-to-market strategy. So you got to think about not just how much capacity do I have, but also is my capacity focused in the right places? And my big insight into revenue planning is that if you are going to write in a change. So if we're going to say we expect the average contract value that our customers are bringing us to increase by 10% this year, that will not happen unless you have capacity on it. You have to always back into an initiative that underpins a change in the dollars. Otherwise, things just don't happen on their own, right? We're not going to increase the speed at which a customer becomes a prospect unless we're focusing on how we're going to do that. And that costs capacity. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
The capacity is related to work productively. Can you maybe some examples of something that you notice that your team is getting exhausted, but it's not really obvious at first sight, and that you'd like to pick up before the thing kind of explodes?
Yeah, great question. The question is, what are some first indications that the team is starting to hit that capacity so that you can be proactive about creating it? My bias is that you work hard to hire the right people to work at your startup. And once they work at your startup, you should trust that they are doing the best that they can always. It is almost never the case that someone who appears to not be doing their job is acting maliciously. Most of the time, overwhelmingly, 99% of the time, it's because they are at capacity and they are making shortcuts for what needs to happen, or maybe they're lacking some of the information that they need. With the sales team, as an example, you might find that the sales team stops doing their admin, or they stop taking their notes. They stop communicating in the ways that you want them to. They're starting to miss some meetings, and you still think the salesperson is performant, but it's all the edges that are starting to drop. That's when a good indicator of capacity. And also just talking to people, right? If people are getting overly stressed, you can see how hard they're working, but we're not getting the outcome that we want to see from that person. That's also a good indication that they're coming up on capacity. When you are doing longer term revenue planning, so let's say we have a revenue goal that's a year away and we want to double our revenue, you can pretty easily see, like, our one salesperson who is stressed out right now will not be able to double capacity. Like, we can't put double the throughput with this person. So in that sort of case, you can sort of like plan for the future in that way. We'll talk about that specific example in the art of lever pulling a little bit later. But yeah, so that's also good to think about when you're doing longer term revenue planning. All right. This, I believe, is actually the last one here. So this is our second cost lever of efficiency. This is how much output per dollar can you expect? So you are spending, let's say on your sales team, $100,000. They are producing $200,000. Sales efficiency multiple of 2. This is usually how efficiency like this is expressed. You might also have efficiency numbers like related to your cost of acquisition. So if you are a more marketing driven company and you're doing ad spend and programmatic spend and things like that, you might also see the same thing expressed where you have the amount of money that's being brought in by the company, your cost of acquisition, and then that giving you your efficiency multiple. Sometimes you want to increase the efficiency of the company. Usually that happens once you know what you're doing and you know that this messaging makes sense. You have a repeatable sales structure. That's when you really want to focus on increasing the efficiency. When you're first getting started, efficiency can almost be intentionally low, especially if you are bringing in any sort of funding. The funding for a pre-seed level company is given with the understanding that efficiency will be low because you're trying out different messaging. Your product is probably the worst quality that it will ever be because you're just getting started. So efficiency is not going to be high when you start intentionally. And I would recommend that you, in some ways, spend money to make money at the beginning. You spend a little bit on ads to run those tests, or you spend a little bit more time figuring things out at the beginning so that you can become more efficient at the end. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that? Okay, so we walked through our 5 revenue side levers. So we have the volume, that's the number of customers in the top. We have our value, that's the dollar amount that the customer is worth to you. We have the time that it takes that prospect to become a customer. We have the rate, that's the rate at which you're converting customers from the very top of the funnel through to the bottom of the funnel. We have retention, so that's how many of your current customers are you expecting to carry into the next cycle. And then on the cost side, we have capacity. So where is that time going that you spend and how much time do you have to spend at your company? And then we have efficiency. So what is what's the multiple that we can calculate between the amount of money that we're bringing in and the amount of money that we're spending to acquire that? Any questions on this before we go into some examples here? Is this feeling like things that you can apply to your current startups? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about the rate and efficiency.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to like, where can I get information about like what is the average rate and efficiency for different kind of industry or different kind of positions should be?
Good question. The question is, where can you get the industry benchmarks for things like efficiency? I would say there are resources that will attempt to give you that. When you were working with startups at the level that you guys are all working at, almost none of those numbers are relevant because efficiency at the very beginning of your customer's life, of your company's life cycle, is always going to be lower than where it should be. So the resources that you can find, and I think maybe after this we can connect with the entrepreneurial desk at the library with Jimmy. There are some resources that we can get to give you those industry benchmarks, but yours are probably not going to be anywhere close to that, and that's okay. That's not something that you need to necessarily stress about at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you actually go get to a figure for these numerical value? So let's say it would differ from industry to industry, from startup to startup. Let's say for a particular startup, how do you go about calculating what the optimal efficiency value should be, let's say 1 year?
Great question. For your startup, how do you calculate the ideal efficiency for today? My suggestion to you would be to know what your efficiency is. So it's quite easy to figure out how much money am I bringing in, how much money am I spending to acquire that amount of money. Know what yours is today and know what direction you're moving in. And as you continue to grow as a company, you can start to approach some of those industry benchmarks. But right now, you're really running your own race, right? It's important to be aware of how your efficiency is changing over time because you want to stay on top of the money flowing in and out of the company. But there is no, we're not trying to achieve ideal efficiency today. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think actually this first example is a good illustration of just that point. So the art is how and when you pull each one of these levers as a part of your go-to-market plan. So we're going to take the it takes money to make money scenario. So in this slide here, we've got the blue is the increase of the lever, the pink is the decrease of the lever. So we've got an increase in volume. We want to increase the number of customers that we're reaching with our online advertising. Let's say it's a B2C company that mainly sells through online advertising. So if we're going to increase that, that means that we're going to increase the spend that we're using of our finances to be able to reach those customers, probably by a lot. And if we're at the very beginning of our company's life cycle, it probably means that we understand the least what messaging is going to work. Maybe we are, you've all done a Google Sheets ad and then like screenshotted it, and maybe it's like it doesn't look great, but it gets the job done. That's maybe where you're at right now. So we're spending money in a direction that we are it's not totally tested on how to get it. That means that we are going to be spending money in an inefficient way intentionally to try and learn from what works and what doesn't at the very top of the funnel with those ads. So that would be a case where understanding your efficiency is important, because we need to see that efficiency is decreasing while we're spending more money on those ads. Does that make sense to everybody? Is anybody spending money on ads today? No? Excellent. I love to hear that. Sometimes companies you just want to go get your first Google ad, but it's just a money sink, in my opinion, until you can figure out what messaging and how to reach those customers. So that's great to hear. All right. The next scenario here with to illustrate the art of how you can pull these levers is the adding salespeople fallacy. So for every B2B company, we'll go through this that sells with salespeople. When you have a sales team, let's say you have 3 really performant salespeople, and we want to double our revenue next year. Your sales manager comes to you and says, we need to hire 3 more salespeople. And that's how we'll get there. We don't need to do anything else. We have 3 performant salespeople. We need 3 more. That's how we'll double our sales. This is a fallacy. It almost never works. It is actually like very important for everyone to know. You can't just add 3 new ones to 3 performant ones and expect to make the same amount because of the amount of time that it takes to onboard and ramp these salespeople into the plan. And because our revenue goal is time bound, maybe these 3 salespeople will become performant into the future. But if we hire them in January and it takes them 6 months to onboard, they won't have a full year of performance to add into your revenue plan. It's just mathematically, it's not going to work. So if you are going to increase this capacity, so this blue lever here, the things that you need to understand that will decrease is the value, how much per customer are we going to get? Because new salespeople very often struggle to achieve the same average contract value. How quickly? It's probably going to take them a little bit longer to convert those customers than an onboarded salesperson. And what rate? They'll probably connect with the customers at a lesser rate than their more experienced peers. So you are adding to capacity, but within the bounds of this revenue plan, you are very likely decreasing these other levers. And if that's going to happen and you want to hit the same amount of money, it means you need 5 salespeople, not 3 salespeople, or however the calculation comes out to be. Does that make sense to everybody? Anytime you want to increase any one of these, it's like they're all tied together in different ways. And a lot of this is common sense tied together, right? If we play out the scenario of adding capacity, we can't expect those people on day 1 to be performant. So where do we expect these other things to go down, and how does that affect our revenue plan is really important to take into account. Does this make sense to everybody? Is anybody selling with a sales model today? Maybe you don't have salespeople, maybe you're doing the selling, but is anyone doing the direct sales to the customer? Yeah, okay, you guys are. Yeah, most of the time it's the founders who do the first selling. It's still salespeople, but it's the salesperson hat that the founder wears. Okay, and our last illustration here, the pivoting to a higher paying customer. We talked about this one a little bit when we defined the levers, but sometimes you will decide that your customer segment is a little bit lower than where it ends up being. So a good example would be the company that I currently work for sells to a wide range of customers in order to help them with their decarbonization strategies. So we sell software that helps them track their carbon footprint, and then through reductions and removals, take that down to 0. We originally started selling to anyone that would have this software. That's a really common strategy when you get started. Anyone who wants to buy it, I want to sell it to you. But what we realized is that actually it's the Fortune 500 companies that have these really specific needs that we can best serve with our software. And we wanted to be able to provide more solutions for them with our product strategy. So we are shifting a little bit up market when it comes to our sales. That is going to increase the amount each customer is paying us, because those enterprise customers will be paying us more than the commercial smaller companies. But when you sell to an enterprise customer, it takes more time to convert that customer from a prospect down to a paying customer. And there are fewer to start with. First of all, there's fewer Fortune 500 companies. Actually, there's only 500 of them that you can go for. And the volume of them is probably going to be less, because to get all 500 would be 100% market penetration, which just never happens, right? So we're focused on a smaller set of companies at the top. We convert them less quickly, but we convert them for a higher value. That makes sense to my company right now because the math works on that. Doesn't always work. And it's good to run that math before you decide to pivot your company up market or down market. I have also worked for a company that decided to pivot down market, where we know intentionally that we are going to decrease the value per customer, but we are increasing at a much higher rate. So we were able to open up a whole new segment of customers that we did not have access to previously. And the math worked out that we would be able to make more money with that strategy. So it goes both ways here. Does this make sense to everybody? Yeah. Okay, so the science here, the definitions quantify what these things are. So we are looking, what is our efficiency? What is the average value that we're making from each customer? How much time does it take? That's a pretty big exercise to go and gather all of that information. And then the art of the lever pulling qualifies. It's, when do we care about each one of these things? Is there anything here that we just don't care about today? We don't care about being efficient. I don't care about how much money I'm getting from each customer. I just want to increase the number of customers I'm getting, right? That's a valid strategy. But that's how you deploy sort of the art of this lever pulling. So I want to zoom in quickly on value, because value really boils down to pricing and how much are you going to charge for your services? It's a very difficult question to answer for startups. There is a lot of science to pricing, a lot of highly Googleable information about pricing strategy. And I'm going to send you to some good resources on the next slide here. I like to break down pricing into 3 different zones. So we have our price point. This is literally how much does it cost? And there are lots of different strategies that you can use to figure out your price point. So you could do cost plus, that's saying my costs are X. I'm always going to charge 5% more of X. So it's always just the difference there. You could also do value pricing. This is saying my customer values having the benefit of my service at this. So I'm going to price at the ceiling of what my customer will pay. There's competitive pricing, so looking across at all your competitors in the industry and even more from there. But all of those methods exist to help you figure out the literal dollar figure of your pricing. There's also price packaging. If you're selling software, this is incredibly relevant to you. When you are looking at software, think about Netflix, think about HubSpot, think about any sort of software that you buy, and the packaging is probably the first thing that you're thinking about. It's Netflix sells on a subscription service. So their price point, I think today is $12.99, might be 15. They keep going up on price point, but their price packaging is an annual subscription, right? That they sell at. Maybe we are working with HubSpot, the CRM. They have a 3-tiered system where you get more features as you go up in the tiers, and the price point goes up in the tiers as well. Maybe you're working with a software that has add-ons. So you have maybe one flat pricing, but you can purchase this for an additional add-on. Maybe that itself is a subscription. There's almost unlimited options here when it comes to packaging. And I recommend going out into the world, finding a pricing model, a price packaging model that appears to work really well, and modeling back onto that. I'll also go over some of the different options here and the history with price packaging. It's kind of interesting. Price positioning is how your customer first understands what your pricing is. So are you posting your pricing on your website? Are they learning the pricing before they talk to you? Are they learning it only after the pitch that you give them? Are they learning it, you know, hopefully not after they've purchased it, but it's really how are you positioning the pricing to them in the context of the benefit that you're delivering them with your product. These are the big pricing resources that I highly recommend. This scienceofrevenue.com is a really excellent website. It goes through a whole bunch of different visual guides for how to define your pricing. I'm going to go through one slide that I really, really like on the next slide from that. And I think they have it now set up in like self-paced learning modules. So it's really, really great one. And then Profitwell is a company that has both revenue tracking software and they also do revenue consulting. But their blog and newsletter breaks down some of these concepts to their very most simple points and then builds them back to complexity in really wonderful ways. So highly recommend their blog and newsletter. And I'll say too, before we dive into the slides, the art of pricing is knowing your customer. You might know that an annual subscription will probably work, right? An annual subscription at $12.99 a year might probably work, but our customers hate it when we offer them an annual subscription at $12.99 for some reason, right? You understand your customer because you've done your customer research. So you're taking what might be an obvious solution and you're adjusting it to make room for your customer. That's really the art of the pricing. You can learn all of these like cost plus value pricing, dynamic pricing to a T and still do pricing wrong if you don't understand your customer and how they will interact with that pricing. I would argue potentially Netflix is misunderstanding its customer because I am frustrated with all of the recent price increases that they have been giving me. I will still pay it, so maybe they're right, but I'm frustrated by it. Okay, so this is the example here of our price positioning. So when does your customer hear the price? There's a lot of room for art in this. You could have your pricing on the website or not on the website. My rule of thumb here is if your product is less than $1,000 a month and I'd say not super competitive, you can put it on your website. If it is more than $12,000 a month, or if it is a commodity that's very easily shopped, I would not put it on your website. But there's a lot of, you know, industry specific pros and cons of why that rule of thumb might not hold. You could also have it on the first call. Maybe you have to have a call with a customer and that's when you would deliver the pricing. So they've got to talk to you, but they don't have to work too hard, right? Maybe it's via materials. So a lot of companies hide the pricing until after an online demo of your software. So you got to talk to us. We have to understand how we're going to position our product in the context of your company customer, and then we can deliver the pricing. And then sometimes it's after the value here. So we need to really understand the context of the value that we're delivering to you, and then we can tell you the pricing. A lot of times this works best for things like consulting services where you really can't. For consulting services, you really have to understand what you're doing, scope out the project, and then deliver the pricing. There's no way that we could deliver that earlier on the website or on the first call. Is anyone thinking about this right now, about when to deliver the pricing information to your customer? Yeah. Do you want to give us an insight with the health startup? Oh, sorry.
So for us, it's more like we need to pitch it to the doctor. The doctor needs to understand if his audience is the one who would be able to use it, or one part of his audience would be willing to take it. And then at the second stage, you need to also pitch to the end customer for us or the patient that okay, this is where you value. So it's more like for the doctor, it's more like the follow-up technique wherein we give them the demo that okay, you give it out for free for a few patients, get a review, and then continue with us. And for the patient, like for the patients, it's more like the first call where like, it's more like during the first interaction, like okay, this is much is what it's going to cost you, and X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, that's a great example.
For us.
Yeah, and for folks on the Zoom, the example given is a charge through scenario where you're charging the doctor first and then the patient is getting charged. So the doctor is finding out the pricing after the value, because you have to understand the whole context of the doctor's situation in order to know the pricing. And then the patient is more on the first call because we just want to be delivering that to the patient earlier in the process. It's a great example. Okay, this is one of the slides from that scienceofrevenue.org. I love this slide because it accomplishes so simply actually a lot of different ideas here. So if we start on the bottom left, and we're also starting in time, right? On the bottom left, you can see that 1990. This is perpetual ownership. This is how things like even software used to be purchased. If you guys remember, and you may not, which makes me sad. I think some of us will remember when you could buy software in a box at Circuit City. And it was a perpetual license of Microsoft Excel that you would literally buy in a box and then take it home and you would always have it. That's how that used to be sold, right? 1990s. We're getting up into the 2000s here, and we're starting to see the boom of software as a service. So we're going to 4-year, 3-year, multi-year subscription where you're paying once and you have it for many years, to annual subscription. And then as we get into the 2010s and beyond here, we're going for a higher frequency of subscription. So quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly subscription. We finally get to usage here and impact. Usage means you only pay when you use the service. The risk here for a business is that your product is not high quality. If your product's not high quality and you charge on usage, you will make very little money because people will not use it. Impact is even more significant than that. So the impact is something like a financial advisor where they only get money when they make you money, right? So if they're not good at their jobs, they're not going to make any money for themselves because they're not giving you that impact. What we saw in time, right, is we had this big boom into SaaS. We had this big movement in the 2010s into impact pricing, but companies didn't want to hold all the risk of having impact or usage-based pricing. So we've seen a little bit of a rebound from this back into SaaS. But as you think about what pricing you want to have for your customers, think about lowest risk for you on the left, highest risk for you as a company on the right, and what frequency makes the most sense for your customers to do. And really, you're trading off risk with the customer, right? If I'm buying Microsoft Excel in a box, I'm taking all the risk. Because what if Microsoft Excel doesn't work for me? Now I have a perpetual license that I spent a lot of money in 2003, to buy this, and it doesn't work for me. That's a big risk for me as a user. I have no risk in impact because if I'm not winning, then I'm not paying. Does that make sense? I love this slide. This is a taste of what's on scienceofrevenue.org. Please visit. There's lots of good stuff. I think this is our last example here of the art of pricing, how we can play around with it. But there's a pricing method that I want to show you why something a little counterintuitive can work really well. So let's say you are a company. You have 3 products. Each one is $50. You're selling product A to the early market, so your, let's say your least educated customer. Product B is the middle market. Maybe they know how to use it and they need a little bit more functionality. Product C is your enterprise, your high market. If you want to convert, let's say we want to increase the rate of customers to product B and product C. In order to do that, we need to increase the number of people that are buying product A, because in theory, you're doing a progression from product A through product B through product C. Think about a piece of software that has a starter enterprise, starter, middle, and enterprise subscription tier, right? So what you might want to do is decrease the amount that you're charging for product A. So we're having what's called a loss leader, and increase the amount for product B, product C. So we want to widen the market, increase the volume of people that are a good fit for product A so that we can increase the feeders basically for product B and product C. You might decide even that you want to keep product B a little bit artificially low or keep it at 50 so that you are creating a nice on-ramp from product A to product B. But the point here is that you might want to artificially decrease your lowest product here to increase the number of folks coming through the funnel. Does that make sense to everybody? So yeah, I would say when you are thinking about science versus art with your companies, always know what the numbers are for your company. It's really, really important that you can say off the top of your head, here's how much value each customer is worth to me. Here's my average efficiency. Here's my cost of acquisition. Here's the amount of capacity that I have as a company. And then challenge those numbers with the art to say, how much money do I think I could make if I were to increase the pricing on if I were to increase the volume? If we were to double our ad spend, what would actually happen if we played that all the way out to the bottom? So key takeaways from this talk today are that the science quantifies here while the art qualifies. We want to learn the numbers and play with them using our art here. There are 7 levers for most companies to understand when building a revenue plan. 5 of them are revenue levers. So we've got our value, volume, time, rate, and retention. We have the 2 cost levers, capacity and efficiency. And then the art is understanding when and how to pull each one of those in your go-to-market plan. I'd also say when thinking about pricing, think about price point, price packaging, and price positioning as separate because they're going to give you 3 really good frameworks to be able to pinpoint what that looks like for your company. And then the art in pricing is understanding your customer. So Schwartz Center and Project Olympus, we love customer discovery for a reason. Do your customer discovery. It's also not a box that you will check at any point in your company journey. It's something you'll keep doing forever. And that's the art of making sure that price is going to be correct. What questions can I take? I think we've got just a couple of minutes here for how some of these concepts apply back to your companies.
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done. No, that's absolutely true. And it's one of those things too. I think I made the point at the beginning, but the company I work for right now, we have a lot of ARR, like in the tens of millions of ARR. Today, we are still figuring all of this out every time we do revenue planning. It's very relevant at the beginning of your customer journey, but you will keep doing this and keep playing around with the levers for the whole life of your company. Anybody else?
I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
This should be done after customer segmentation and positioning.
I would say so. Question is, should it be done after customer segmentation and positioning? The whole conceit of this plan, it relies on you knowing who the customer is. So you can't know the volume of customers that you can get in the top if you don't know your total addressable market or you don't know the specifics of your customer segment, right? Or your ideal customer profile. So I'd say do some of that foundational work first. And then when it comes to setting that, I want to make $1 million by the end of the year. This is what you need for that exercise. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thank you guys so much for your attention today, and happy to take any questions that you have. If you want to shoot me an email and you just let me know that you came to the Connects today and you've got follow-up questions or anything specific to your companies, feel free to shoot me an email and I'm happy to get back to you.